Talk about Donald Trump now. The former president, in the latest of his many indictments, has been charged 4 times over his alleged efforts to overturn the 2020 US election. You remember the storming of the Capitol Hill, etc., etc. So he stands accused of trying to overturn the democratic will of the American people. Strikes me quite a few British politicians tried to overturn the democratic will of the British people when it came to Brexit. But if it's Donald Trump, it must be a crime, mustn't it? Let's talk to Chairman of the Republican Overseas Organisation here in London, Greg Swenson. Afternoon, Greg.
Hello, Kevin.
I mean, I don't think there's any doubt that all of these indictments of Donald Trump, all the legal difficulties that are emerging for him, are being orchestrated behind the scenes by the Democrats. This is in a Washington court. Washington is a Democrat town. And basically, they're trying to undermine Donald Trump's bid to be the next president of the United States, although some people believe they're doing this deliberately so that Donald Trump does become the candidate, and they fancy fighting Donald Trump more than they fancy fighting Ron DeSantis. Either way, it is being alleged that these charges, these indictments, are politically motivated. Donald Trump likens it to Nazi persecution. I wouldn't quite go that far, but they are politically motivated, these indictments, aren't they?
Oh, there's no doubt about it. I mean, they've been at this, Kevin, for 8 years. You know, they started with the election denial in 2016, where they claimed Trump was illegitimate president, and they had the Russia collusion hoax that they created from the Hillary Clinton campaign to argue that, you know, he was illegitimate and the election was stolen. I mean, we've seen this movie before, but they kept at it with the first impeachment, which, you know, with all this Burisma and Ukraine news coming out of the Biden family business, you know, it's proven that impeachment was reckless. You can make an argument for the second impeachment because it was a political move by Trump. And, you know, not everything that's bad in politics, and you can argue some of the stuff he did was bad, but not everything political is illegal. It's protected political speech. And especially in the U.S., where you have the First Amendment that protects that. So, you know, you can argue that Trump was unethical or reckless or destructive, you know, whatever you want, but they tried the impeachment. It didn't work. They came close. They had 57 votes in the Senate. They need 66. But, you know, this again is, you know, Edmund Burke said that, you know, the impeachment should be tried before statesmen and by statesmen, and upon, you know, using the morality of the country as a guide. But that's not criminal. You know, the crimes are about the law. And this is clearly not, you know, they're stretching. They did this with the Alvin Bragg case. They're doing their best with the document case to make crimes out of something that's political. And you can disagree with the politics, but that's why we have elections, and that's why we have impeachment.
So Trump, I believe, is expected in court tomorrow. But politically, every indictment he gets, every legal charge he suffers, he becomes more popular.
Right.
So I think that the Democrats are unwittingly propelling him towards the White House.
And I don't know about unwittingly, because if his numbers went up every time there's an indictment and his fundraising went up, they would stop doing the indictments. They would sit on them for a while. They would wait. They waited, you know, they've waited 6 years or 8 years on Hunter Biden. I'm sure they could wait a few on Trump, but they want him to be the candidate. There's no doubt about it. The timing is always fishy too. I mean, every time there's a big press release or announcement about the Biden family business or the Biden cartel, there's the Justice Department comes up with an indictment. I mean, granted, they've been in the works for a while, but the timing is always funny that they seem to want to wash out any bad news about the Biden cartel with, you know, prosecutions of President Trump.
Why is Trump being prosecuted for taking documents, alleged classified documents from Washington to his home in Mar-a-Lago in Florida, allegedly illegally, when President Biden did exactly the same thing to his home in Delaware and is not being prosecuted?
Because they don't like President Trump. You know, they're mad that he won the election in 2016. You know, they've been at this from the minute he won the election, even before that. So, you know, the whole Get Trump movement, which, you know, was started with the basically the rejection of the results in 2016, which sounds familiar. I know he's done the same thing, and I'm not advocating that, but they've been trying to get Trump for 8 years since he walked down the escalator, and they think that if they keep trying, they will get to him. The one difference, or there's a couple of differences between the two cases. Biden was only vice president, so he doesn't have the privileges that the president has. So you can argue that Biden's possession of these documents, you know, next to the Mustang in the garage at the beach house where Hunter Biden, convicted drug felon, was living and had access to it. Also at the Penn Biden Center, which was funded by the Chinese Communist Party, also with access from Hunter Biden. He had keys to the office. So did Dr. Jill. You know, this was completely reckless. And again, he was only vice president and a senator prior to that, where he had classified documents. The one thing that they found in their never-ending effort to differentiate and justify why President or Vice President Biden had these documents and now President Biden and Trump's case is different, is they argue that he didn't cooperate with the subpoena. So that's been President Biden's claim. Well, I've cooperated. The minute they called me out on breaking the law, I gave them the documents that they asked for. Of course, that's not until the lawyers came in, his lawyers, and sniffed around and made sure everything was kosher and maybe hid some documents, who knows. But Trump did not cooperate when the archive department reached out and asked for the documents back. You know, there's a good argument that he could have avoided all of this if he had just cooperated, but that's not his nature, as we know.
A couple of minutes left, Greg. We need to deliberate on what will come of all this. Let's say Trump gets the nomination for the Republicans, and of course he's up against Ron DeSantis, but it's looking to me like Trump will get it. Will he win?
No, he will not in the general election, and that's not necessarily fair. You know, they've been after him, as I said, for 8 years. It's not fair, but politics is not fair. But he is capped at polling maybe 47%. I don't think he'll get that much because he's lost a lot of support since the 2020 election, since the January 6th debacle, and then, of course, since the 22 midterms, where Democrats were using Democratic campaign money to fund Trump-endorsed candidates in the primaries to ensure that they were elected. So the model that the Democrats have, which is making Trump the nominee, that worked in 2022. And so they'll stay at it. That's why they're doing this. I wouldn't be surprised if they were contributing to his campaign at some point. But it's because they've done it. I mean, in my home state of Illinois, they contributed $22 million to some nut job from Southern Illinois that they knew would lose, and they contributed to his campaign in the primary. So
I'll tell you what, Greg, only in America we will follow this story with your excellent help throughout the next few months.